Dick Kramlich probably needs no introduction in the NEA, legendary investor and a China hand as well. And Dick, I know you were living in Shanghai for the past couple of years. Maybe you could tell a little bit about that experience and what impact it had.
Yeah, let me try. I'll try to tie it back to your other
Sure.
question.
Okay.
How I got involved in this in the first place. Well, I like to get around, and that's number one. And I've, been involved. I have to tell you, my wife was born in Indiana. At the age of 3, she moved to Bangkok. Her grandfather had been, in the days of failed colonialism by America. The Philippines was the failed attempt at colonialism, and her grandfather was about 6'5", and he was a real engineer. And Teddy Roosevelt, I think, asked him to go over and put in the infrastructure in the Philippines. And so he was over there for about 8 or 9 years, and he put in the power plants and the roads and the railroads, and he was very involved in that for a long time. He's a great engineer. And so Pam's father grew up over there, as well as the rest of their family. And after that stint was finished, he came back to they came back to the U.S. And then he went to Colombia, and then he got a job with Chevron, and it was in Burma. And he was actually involved in ferrying the fuel up to the Flying Tigers up the Burma Road, and then went into the Navy and served in the Navy over in the Pacific Theater. And he and a couple of friends said, if we get out of this alive, let's start a trading company and come back here to live. And so they agreed to do that. And so he was over there, and that's when Pam and her sister and brother and mother all moved over to Bangkok. They were setting up the trading offices of this company. And so they started in Bangkok, and then they moved to Manila, and from Manila to Cebu, and then Cebu to Singapore, and then to Tokyo, and came back to the United States at age 17. So she was over there from the age of 4 to the age of 17. And really, one of the things I thought was very great about her when I met her was her bearing, and I thought it incorporated a lot of the Oriental characteristics, which I find to be very attractive. And so I think it was just a habit, and just the mannerisms and so on, I thought was interesting. She doesn't look a least bit Chinese, but she gets along with Chinese people like ham and eggs. I mean, it's really amazing. So anyway, so that was one part of the equation. And then the second part of the equation, partially just random, but I keep my eye on a lot of things going around in the world. And so I'd been going on various missions to China since the early 80s. And for example, one thing was the Exploratorium. We had a French director of the Exploratorium in San Francisco. I was the vice chairman of the board. And we were invited. We decided one of the things we ought to do is develop many exploratoriums all over the globe. And one of them was in Beijing in the late 80s. And so we went over there at the invitation, actually, and the Japanese actually were financing this, and in downtown Beijing. Anyway, put in a fabulous exploratorium over there, and I spent a couple of weeks there at that time. But things like that. And so I'd be going over, I was watching people do experiments and investing in China, and I really I liked the entrepreneurial spirit. And so I was been monitoring all this for a long time and saw a lot of false starts in the 90s. It was a good place to lose money in the 90s. And there's a fellow named Jack Wadsworth who used to be with Morgan Stanley. I had a good fortune of being involved in Apple at the beginning. And Jack was with Morgan Stanley, and that was the first so-called high-tech roadshow that Morgan Stanley ever put on. early 80s, and taking Apple public. And I thought Jack was a really great guy. And so then he was dispatched to Tokyo, where Morgan Stanley had a fairly small operation, and he built it up to a sizable operation in Tokyo. And then he went to Hong Kong. And so I made it my business to go see him in every place he went, and saw how he was building the franchise of Morgan Stanley in that area. And Jack is a very good student, and he learned a lot about China, and developed a lot of long-standing relationships that count for a lot, I think, in China. So that was going on. And then I was involved in the Bay Area Council, and I was, by that time we'd gotten interested in China, but Bay Area Council wanted to do an outreach program, and they had a sister city relationship with Shanghai. And so I was asked to head up the Bay Area Council's the liaison activities with Shanghai. And so we went over on a trip to see Vincent Lowe, because Vincent was the head of the Yangtze River Delta Council, and I was the liaison for the Bay Area Council. So we went over, and I asked Ken Wilcox from Silicon Valley Bank to go along with me, because Ken is a great guy, and he had ambitions to do something in China relative to Silicon Valley, much like what you said earlier, Joe, and that where there was a natural transference of interest. And so anyway, Vincent took us around. He spent a week with us. He called himself our chauffeur, and he took us around to all the projects, and he did something pretty amazing in Shanghai, I thought. I was very impressed with him, because you know, up to that point, the major way of doing things in China is to tear down and build up. Mm-hmm. And Vincent is a very thoughtful guy. And he had been in Italy with the architect, Ben Wood, that he was working on a 5-page paper.
Are you talking about Zentendi? His project there?
Yeah. There.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. You read my mind. Pretty transparent. But anyhow, so he had gone to Italy with an architect named Ben Wood, and he had gotten this award from the Shanghaiese government to Shanghai government to put in to rebuild Xintiandi, which is in part of Shanghai. That was sort of a middle-class area, and it consisted of a lot of lane houses, and it really dated back to 1840. And so, anyhow, he said when he was in Italy, as I said, and he said, you know, Ben, I'd really like to do something special. He got this award, which turned out to be a multi-billion-dollar award on the basis of five-page paper, which is based on trust for the most part, which I think is a very big thing to know about China. And so anyhow, he said, I'd like to do something really special, and I can't quite decide what to do. And Ben said to him, he said, you know, Mr. Lowe, he said, here we are in this wonderful city called Siena, small town Siena. He said, if you had the same assignment in Siena, would you tear down all these old houses? And he said, touche.
Okay.
He said, that's how Xintiandi came to be. So anyway,
we'll come.
Long and short of it.
That's great.
That's how I got interested in it.
That's great. Thank you very much. And we'll come back to that, because we're going to come back to best and worst deal and experience in China. But
we'll go
yeah.
into that one.
Okay.
Is that personal or professional?
A little mixed. That's okay. They go together, right?